Thank you. As Kathy said when she began, here we are moving towards Common Core. And thinking about moving to Common Core, students and teachers have to think differently. And in that process, this was driven by the new shifts that came in our standards. As the shifts will drive in mathematics, the thinking of students and teachers as well, to think about focus and coherence and rigor. No longer is it just skill and drill and move on, but we have to think about focus, coherence, and rigor. And the standards are very scaffolded from the beginning to the end, so the way students think must develop year after year. As well as the shifts in ELA, students are going to be exposed to more rigorous text, more complex text, text with more relevance, texts that are more real world. They're going to be exposed to academic vocabulary that perhaps they haven't been used to. And students are going to be required to cite evidence from text instead of basing their responses on personal opinions. And with that in mind, our students haven't been trained for that. That isn't exactly the way we have been teaching over the past few years. So we're going to have to make a shift in our teaching and in our students' way of thinking in order to accommodate those needs. And what we hope to accomplish here today, our clear target, is that when you leave here, you will understand the metacognitive processes involved and academic feedback necessary in order for students to learn to the level of rigor we are expecting.
And so we begin with an essential question. And Elaine's going to bring by an index card for you because we're going to move into just a little bit of a pre-assessment. That's perfect for the last day of your training. So the essential question is how can I provide this specific feedback in a timely way in order to facilitate the metacognitive process? So those are big words for how am I going to help my students to reach their full potential? That's our essential question for this session. Activating prior knowledge. So we're going to draw a line down the center of your index card, and on the left-hand side of your index card, just list the words that come to mind when you think about academic feedback. Just a few words. About another 3 or 4 seconds to wrap that list up. And so I wonder if anyone wrote focused or something, a synonym for focused, or timely. Anyone write timely? Concise? Specific? What about standards-based? These are the words that typically come off the top of someone's head. That when they think about feedback, of course we want it to be timely because we want it to be something the student can manage. But these are not the only things that we should think about when we think about academic feedback in relation to metacognitive processes. Let's look at the other side of your index card. On the right-hand side of your index card, you would list the words that come to mind when you hear the term metacognitive processes. All right, let's see how you did on this. Did you think of any of these? Thinking about thinking. That's the first thing I think of too. Metacognition, that's thinking about thinking. Questioning. Writing. Speaking. And listening. So today's session will help to alleviate any misunderstandings about how academic feedback and metacognitive processes work in tandem in order to get the greatest student achievement. Elaine has given you an article. And this article is one that was written by Grant Wiggins. And if you're familiar with any of Wiggins' work, are you? Anyone? Grant Wiggins? Well, Grant Wiggins is a strong advocate of academic feedback in the classroom in order to help the students become their best student. Let's take a look at this quote by Brookhart. Just take a moment to read that. What Susan Brookhart is saying in this quote is that someone cared enough about my work to read it and to think about it, or to listen to me explain my work and to provide me with some structure regarding where I go from here. Someone cared enough about me. So what is academic feedback altogether? And we've talked about it. It is specific. And many of you said that on your list. You wrote that on your list. I told Elaine, as a matter of fact, a few minutes ago, those boys are twins. And she said, how do you know that? I just know things. All right, so feedback is specific. And it relates directly to the learning. And that's not all learning. That is your learning and your learning and your learning on an individual basis. It's compared to models or samples or exemplars of some kind. It's related to the performance of the student, but it is not personal. Your handwriting is sloppy. That's personal. So academic feedback is not related, is not personal to the child, for what the child is doing, such as that. I want to pay special attention to comparison to models or samples or exemplars as we look at the kind of work in the what am I looking at? The shifts.
Yeah.
Okay, the academic shifts for ELA and for mathematics. Our students need to know what really good work looks like. Not to say I'm going to copy this exact model, but this is a good example of a model. They want to see what is out there. What can my work look like? Comparison to models. So as you look at your article, I'd like for you to turn to the second page. Just go beyond the opening remarks from Grant Wiggins. And I want to get right into the 7 steps to academic feedback. And the first one begins with goal referenced. Two questions that can be asked when we're checking if it's goal reference is, are my goals specific? And then what do I need to do to reach that goal? So individually with students, we are challenged with addressing the goals that each child needs to reach their full potential. Goal referenced means that effective feedback is stated for that individual student. The next step in effective feedback, the second one according to Grant Wiggins, is that it is tangible and it is transparent. We're not trying to be tricky with our students. We're providing them concrete examples of what they should be working on. If we're working with readers, we let them hear how they have read Perhaps they audio tape their reading and they listen to it and we pause it and we give them concrete examples of what we're hearing, and then we provide for them an exemplar of how that should sound. When I talk with students, I look for evidence that the child is moving toward their goal based on the tangible and the transparent feedback that I have given to them. The next piece of academic feedback, according to Grant Wiggins, is actionable feedback, something that the student can do, something that they can put their hand on, something that's very specific and concrete. When you solve this math problem, you'll need to line up your decimals like this. That's concrete. Something that they can do. Oh, show me and I can do that. Show me what it looks like and I can do that. That is actionable feedback. User-friendly simply means that we're not using our jargon, our education jargonese with our students, that we are using terms that they are familiar with. So it will manifest differently at different grade levels. But certainly I'm going to use precise vocabulary with my students, whether they are in the elementary levels or up in the middle and high school levels. But still, we want this to be user-friendly. We want it to be concise, whether I'm giving them oral feedback that's user-friendly, that they can truly understand, or if I'm writing it on their paper. Something that is user-friendly. Oh, I see what she means. I can do that. Timely and ongoing. Those two go hand in hand. Timely feedback is something that we know can benefit our student. If we're trying to get our students, these represent all of our students in one class period, and we want them to reach that clear target, I need to make sure that I am giving them timely feedback. We don't want them practicing that which is going to throw them off. They're going down the wrong path. That's harder to undo than it is if we give them the feedback as quickly as possible, and then that feedback should be ongoing. It's not a one and done. It is ongoing. But because these are our children and we need to get them to that clear target of the day, our lesson for this day, that timely and ongoing feedback is one-on-one with my children. Because what's good for one may not be what's necessary for another to reach that goal. And how do I do that if I have 145 seventh graders? It's hard. But is it worthwhile to help them reach that goal? Consistency is key. And if I were going to choose just one of these 7 keys, consistency would be key. How many of you teach in a middle or high school setting? And even in elementary settings, sometimes we're departmentalizing. And so what I think is something that a student needs to work on may not be what my colleague believes that student needs to work on. Have you ever run into that before? You believe that they need to work on a specific, perhaps summarizing statements, yet they're not doing that in social studies, and the teacher's saying they're doing just fine in another class period. Oh, they're doing just fine. But I believe that they need to work on summarizing. Can we summarize in social studies? Absolutely. Can we summarize articles that we read in science? Absolutely. And so in order to provide that kind of feedback consistently, then it's essential that we as colleagues sit together when we look at student work. So we plan collaboratively. Are we planning collaboratively, most of you across the board? That's so important, to plan collaboratively. I can bring in samples of student work. We're sharing students. And so if I bring in samples of student work in my class and share it with you, then we are on the same page regarding what this student needs to do in order to reach their goals. Consistency is key. Not to mention, oftentimes, the teacher that doesn't give that descriptive type of feedback to a student turns out to be the favorite because the child's not having to change practices that are getting them stuck. But if we're all consistent in what we're asking of our students to help them achieve that goal, then we're going to get, picture a Venn diagram. We'll get the biggest bang for our buck regarding student achievement. So teachers with a common understanding of expectations and quality, what is good quality? So a simple, straightforward test for the feedback system is, am I moving students in the direction toward their goal? If I'm not, then I should do something different. This article by Grant Wiggins that we provided to you here is very, very straightforward, and one that was so powerful that we knew that it blended perfectly with metacognition. So to ensure progress toward any goal, using that academic feedback is going to foster that thinking about thinking within a student. The shifts in mathematics and English are causing us to realize that students have got to start thinking more about their own successes and take that responsibility. But we are their teachers. And so that's our guidance that we need to do. We need to provide the guidance for our students.
So go back a minute and look at the right side of your blue card. And we ask you to jot down some words. On the left, what is academic feedback? You've been reassured and reaffirmed of that terminology. And we ask you to just take about 10 seconds and look at the right side. What words did you write? Now, if you'll take a minute and turn and talk to your shoulder partner or to the person behind you about the words that you have written, that might cause some shifts, or you're closer there. There. You may have to do a turn. Jamie, I can pair you up. That's all right. One more time. So where did you arrive from? Are you from here? Atlanta. I taught in Atlanta when I first graduated. Columbia Hills Elementary School, Kings Road Elementary, DeKalb County. Okay, if you'll wrap your thought up. Clarksville. Okay, you're the expert on metacognition, and that's why you're in that classroom. Because you know what metacognition is. Metacognition is when students think about their thinking. When they know that the complex text in front of them that is going to require close reading, or that complex mathematical performance task that is in front of them, that they can ask themselves questions to identify and clarify what they need to do in order to be successful. And students that are aware of metacognitive processes also know how to monitor their thinking. But you think about those students in your classroom. Of the 30 students sitting there, most of them have been raised in a tech world where they don't have to think. They can press a button and they instantly have access to answers. Google is their best friend. You don't know the answer to how to get to the Marriott, just Google it. You'll find your answer. You don't have to think about getting the map, reading the map, solving the problem. So those processes have not been developed in our students. So when they walk into our classroom, we think that they are ready, we think they're prepared, and then that's when the frustration sets in. So you have to go back and you have to let yourself know our role as teachers has turned to facilitators. and our role as students will now turn into thinkers. And that's very different from our way of thinking before. But why would I do this? This is the only way that we will foster those habits of minds that they need in order to be successful in the real world. Because when they do get out there, they will have to think. They will not always just be able to push a button or search Google to find their answer. Once students begin thinking just like we do, how many people in here enjoy reading a book? You want to see how it ends. Anybody in here work crossword puzzles, number puzzles? Because we like to see that happen. We like to see our brain engaged. Students don't know that once they start trying it, just like exercise, it actually turns out to be very enjoyable. But as we teach our students to think, it's going to be very much like physical therapy. Has anybody in here been hurt before? Maybe broken an arm or a leg and required physical therapy? So the process is, you go to your doctor, the teacher, and the doctor says, your arm is broken, but it's healing now, so now you need to go to the physical therapist. So he gives you the little white card and you go to the physical therapist. And so here you are, the physical therapist. This is my group of peers I'm learning from. And the physical therapist starts working on that arm, the arm I hurt. Now the arm I hurt, he's making me use, and now it's making my arm do what? Hurt more. But let me tell you, I finished my 30 minutes. I go back to the receptionist. She gives me that little white card again. And what do I do next week? I return, and my arm still hurts. I'm going to go to my peers group, my physical therapist, and I'm going to exercise some more. And then this is going to continue till one day I'm going to not have to stop at that desk on my way out and get that little white card. Why? Because I can do it on my own now. It was hard, the process was tough, but now I can do it on my own. And that's what we have to do as we teach students to think, and they have not had ownership for this. So we give them the feedback they need, and we have that user-friendly, timely, ongoing, consistent feedback that we give them that tells them we are in this together. This is your next step in making it happen. So those questions help students think. What are the 7 Ps? They begin on the lowest level. If you're familiar with balloons or you're familiar with DOK, which I believe Kathy presented earlier today, you take students from their lowest level of thinking, when the smallest amount of their brain has to be used to take them to where the most complex parts of their brain are. So this simply begins with your basic, your who, what, where, when, how, and why questions that you would ask in no matter what subject area, whether it was math, ELA, science, social studies, technical text, or even your related arts. Why are you doing this? As you look at that, mark in the text, that's low level, what you need to know in order to be able to be successful. Maybe draw a question mark where you're not quite sure what it is you need to know, which takes you to questions and inferences. You move students to the next level. First they say, this is what I know, this is my who, what, where, when, how, and why, this is what I'm going to do. But this is the part I don't know about. But what would happen if I didn't do this step in a math task, a math performance task? What if I just skip this part of the text because that's just really too hard for me? And it has too many words. I'll just read the beginning paragraph and I'll read the last paragraph and I'll just be as smart as everybody else in the room. That's the way they want to think. But we have to teach them to question, and that questioning is okay. And that during that question they will struggle. And that struggle time is when we learn. You and I know as adults, our greatest memories are probably times when they were at one extreme, either really bad or really good. And students are the same way. When they're very successful in their learning, they're going to take that and they're going to move on. And when they struggle, they're never going to get the process that they went through. So it's okay for students to struggle, and it's good for them to struggle. So let them question, let them make inferences. We don't have to Google them right back all the answers. We don't have to be the know-all. This allows them to think at a greater depth than we have allowed, because we're so quick to move through our lesson. This is another piece that's hard for teachers, because we've got that 50 minutes or we got that 48-minute class, and we need to get in as much as we can. And I need to say as much as I can. I just need to fill those sweet little children's heads up with as much knowledge as I can before I scurry them on down the hall. And that's not the way our students are going to learn. That's not the way real life is. It's somebody feeding them information. They need time to think. So you give them academic feedback. You lead them, you guide them, and then you give them time to think. Give them time to talk about it. Because it doesn't matter how long I stand up here and talk to you about metacognition or academic feedback. Once you start talking about it, you're going to learn more about it than I could ever tell you. Because there's more information that is learned from ear to ear than there is from ear to ear. Because you learn more when you hear it. And when I make that commitment in writing, that learning goes from here to the back of my brain. And that's just brain research if you study it. So giving students airtime in the class. They need to talk, not just to us, but to each other. And sometimes to themselves. Now, I know you young whippersnappers in here probably haven't started this yet, but there'll come a time in your life when you become like your mother and you find yourself talking to yourself, okay? That's just a natural process in life. So we can go ahead and let our students start doing it now, okay? That's how we learn, and that's how we remember. Once we get students talking about it, then they'll get excited about it, just like that book you read or that puzzle you want to finish. Then they will as we give them academic feedback, they will begin to predict and determine what's going to happen next. That long mathematical problem that they were so afraid of, now they want to see how they can solve it. What is going to give me another one like that, teacher? I think that I can handle it. Look at this text that I was afraid to read before. Because you have modeled it, because you have given me that exemplar, because you have shown me that sample, I know what it is supposed to look like. And you've asked me questions, so now I can determine what is important. You no longer have to stand up here and tell me who the main characters are or what numbers I need to use in the problem. Because you've given me feedback, I know how to ask myself and determine what is important. And once I can say it, once I can write it, that helps me visualize it. And once that picture comes in my head, I can't take that away. That's forever held on in my learning. And with that, I know how to connect it, not just here in the moment. One and done, I one and done that problem and we move on, but I can take it other places. It actually makes me connect and want to continue to learn. Students need to talk to each other, but they also need to have that conversation with the text. And just as they need to talk around the table, they need to ask questions, they need to predict, and they need their think time. How many people are familiar with that practice? Their private think time. And along with that comes the use of academic feedback in order to help them be successful with those tasks. And when they can apply it to their real life, then they can synthesize. They understand and know that what they are doing in their class, in their reading class, is going to apply in their science class. It's going to apply in their math class. It's going to apply in all subject areas. That the math problems that they're doing has a correlation to science, and it has a correlation, more importantly, both of these, to the real world. This helps students have a clearer picture of what is going on. So the tie that binds is the teacher's way of changing their thinking, the students teaching the students' way of changing their thinking, and the teacher facilitating that process so that they go hand in hand. Jamie's giving you right now a handout by Linda Darling Hammond. It's an excerpt from a text that she wrote, but one of the key quotes that she has in that text says, "Opportunities for immediate feedback in the midst of an activity is one way for students to learn from their learning." Within your classroom, as you move back into next school year, I hope that you find yourself spending more time in your planning to give students feedback and planning to give students time to move through the metacognitive processes they need in order to become familiar with the task. Because once you do that, that will take you back to where we began in our presentation. That's with this essential question.
So how can we provide specific and timely feedback to learners in order to facilitate the metacognition process? They go hand in hand. Elaine said, I didn't know those were married, and I think that we see that they are married. They do go hand in hand. Students are thinking about their thinking with our guidance, and that is through the feedback that we provide to them. We wanted to share this with you to help answer that essential question. Provide specific and timely feedback to learners in order to facilitate the metacognitive processes. Let's take just a minute to look at this.
What would you guys say to teachers if they're not getting high quality work? Could they learn something from this, and what would you say to them that they could do differently in their classroom?
This is a story called Austin's Butterfly, and it's a true story about a first grade boy, and his name is Austin, and he goes to school, or used to go to school, in a town called Boise, Idaho. And in his class in Boise, Idaho, they were studying butterflies, and he had to do a project. His job in the first grade was to draw a butterfly, and this is the butterfly that he picked. Austin had to use this photograph as his model, and he had to draw an accurate scientific drawing of this butterfly. This is called a tiger swallowtail.
I know it!
Can you tell Toby why it's called tiger?
Because it kind of has the stripes of the tiger right there.
Good. So, here was Austin's job. He was supposed to do a scientific drawing of that butterfly. But remember, Austin was only in first grade. And you know what he did? He forgot to look like a scientist carefully. He got his paper and he just started to draw the image of a butterfly that he had in his head. And he wasn't looking like a scientist, and so this is what he drew. It's not bad, and it is a butterfly, but does it look exactly like this? No, it doesn't yet. It doesn't look exactly like this yet. And so they didn't look at this and say, good, Austin, you're done. They said, Austin, good start. Now we can start giving you critiques, so you can do a second draft and make it better, and a third draft and make it better, and you can make it much, much closer to this, and he was ready to go. All of the first graders in his critique group sat on the floor like you guys are, and they decided to split their advice into two kinds. First, just the shape of the wings. And then when the shape was right, they'd give him advice about the pattern inside the wings. Alia, what would you say?
You can make it much pointier.
Good. These wings could be much pointier. Who else would add something? Attack, what would you say?
About the angle, because, not to be mean about
Yes.
the angle, it's just not exact, so...
Okay, so show me. Come on up here, Attack. Show me what you would ask him to do slightly differently.
like to make it a little longer.
Longer where? Draw where you would do it.
Right there.
Okay, so pull this out longer.
Yeah.
That's very specific, Attack. Thank you. Jamila, what would you say?
It's like a triangle.
Good. Jamila, I love that. So you're saying more like a triangle shape. And I agree. Well, you know what? Those first graders came up with most of those same ideas. And do you know what Austin said? He said, okay, I'll go try. And he went back to his seat and he drew this. Does this look more like a triangle? Yeah. Did he go out further, like Atak was suggesting?
Yes.
Did he add some jaggedness here?
Yes.
Like Cindy? Did he get rid of that bottom thing?
Yes.
So he did listen to his friends and he made it better. It's not perfect. Toby, what would you say?
I'd say don't put those little tail things so pointed in. I'd say put them more pointed down.
Good. Okay, Ethan, what would you say?
I think you should make the wings like this, not like this.
Okay, he listened to his friends and they said, this is really a lot better, Austin. That second draft really is better.
Yeah, maybe you can make a third one.
Good, maybe he could make a third draft. And so he did this draft.
That's his third draft.
That's his third draft, Hadley. That's just right. Elijah, what do you notice there?
Well, one wing's more pointed than the other, and that side is a little bit higher than the others.
Good. Coburn?
Right here, it doesn't have the inside thing still.
Ah, okay. Needs a little bit more of that notch. So, do you think maybe he should do a fourth draft?
Yeah.
Well, that's just what he said. He said, shoot, okay, I got round again. I'll go back and do a fourth draft.
Listen.
He listened. Does it look more even like Elijah was suggesting?
Yes.
Yeah, and does it look like it's coming out a little sharper, like Cindy was suggesting? And like Attack was saying, it's a little, the angle looks a little better. So now Austin was feeling really good. He said, am I ready to add some pattern? And they said, okay, why don't you try adding some of the pattern? And he did.
Oh, he's good at it. He is so good.
And then they said, Austin, you're ready for color. Let's look at his last draft. And what do you think? Did it come out really good?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about how much progress he made? And Tef, what would you say about his progress?
He made like a lot of progress. He persevered doing it. His friends were honest with him.
What was it about the kinds of advice that they gave that allowed him to get better each time? Hassan?
Well, they told him what was wrong about it.
Did they say it's just wrong, or were they more specific?
They were more specific, but they weren't mean about it.
Great. Hadley.
Made 6 drafts.
And so is that something that other kids should learn from? What should we learn from that?
We can make other drafts if it's not right.
Good. So if it's not right, you can keep doing more drafts to make it better.
You just don't use things in your head. You want to use a sharp eye.
Good. He used the eyes of a scientist. Great.
Give me some feedback regarding Austin's butterfly.
And this is first grade.
Yes.
I'm just amazed at what he started with and some interactions from his peers, what he came up with from beginning to end. Think about if they hadn't given me suggestions, that would have been it. He would have never reached that potential.
Exactly.
I teach first grade, and I think the hardest thing to get little ones to realize is that your first draft isn't your last draft, and that it's okay to keep getting better, and that to realize that, it doesn't matter how old they are, to realize that just because you've done something once, you explained to the doctor wrote his book many times, before he finished it, things like that. That's an example. I would love to be able to get a hold of that clip, even to show my class. It's a clip on the internet or
It's a Vimeo. We'll leave it with someone here. It's a wonderful clip. And I'll tell you, I work predominantly with middle and high school students, and they have a hard time accepting that we can have more than one draft.
What kind of academic feedback did we see here?
Respect.
It's very specific. Finally, my question when I was listening to the specific feedback was, how do I do that in my classroom without telling them how to do it? Because when I was sitting there thinking, I was like, I would question my student.
That is right. That's what I would recommend, is asking those assessing and advancing questions as you move them toward that goal.
And that it is those assessing and advancing questions that facilitate that metacognitive process. So the more that you do it with those students, the less you have to ask. They will it will become their habit of mind. It's long, it's hard, it's painful. It's like physical therapy. And our students aren't ready for it. So you can't do it 1 or 2 days and okay, well, they ought to have it mastered. All of us know that in order to break a bad habit, it takes 28 days. It also takes the same amount of time to develop a good habit. So we need to remember as we work with students, this is a process, both teaching ourselves and holding ourselves accountable to the academic feedback piece, as well as guiding students through the metacognitive processes. And the best way we can do that is through our think alouds.
I would have accepted the little butterfly at one time. Oh, he's in 1st grade, what a great butterfly. Good job, buddy. Do you think so? We do it with our own personal children. We've done it in the classroom. I've done those sorts of things in the classroom too. But where I did not continue the process of asking the leading questions to provide him with feedback, the students had it. Those children were able to provide feedback that helped Austin get the butterfly. It almost looked like the picture.
The teacher did a good job of specifically stating at the beginning that his goal was a scientific drawing of a butterfly. So he was defining it as not some Mother's Day card you did every year. He was defining it as, we want to bump this up. So that needs to be done.
You know, and I really like the academic vocabulary, such as scientific drawing of a butterfly, but also the precise vocabulary used with these children, which is essential to use the precise vocabulary.
In our school, and I'm sure this is from a program, I couldn't tell you which one it is, but we use the students a lot stars and wishes. And so when they're sitting on the carpet, they'll say, does anyone have any stars you want to tell me about this? And they will say, I noticed that, and they'll say all the good things. And eventually somebody will label theirs, you know, antenna and wings and whatever. And then someone will give them a star, and the teacher will say, oh, I love how you label that. Well, then the next time, then the other kids copy the things that were given stars. And then the wishes, if somebody eventually forgets to label it, you know, later in the year, they say, oh, I wish they would have labeled it. And so they start to remember things that they heard other people say during those precious times. It really increases their abilities.
Sounds good. Regarding metacognition, Austin was given feedback on changing the parts of his butterfly to look more scientific. He had to use metacognitive processes to change the look of that butterfly. He was given the feedback. He then had to take that feedback and do something with it. And that's where Elaine was suggesting that we stand firm as educators. We've got to be strong for 28 days at least to help break or make a habit. And these habits of mind for our students are something that we are trusting in the upper grades that elementary folks are doing so that we can continue that process. It's going to have to start somewhere, and we're trusting that it's starting down there in the elementary grades. And then we have, you guys, elementary folks, have to rely on us to continue that process. Kathy, you were going to say something?
I was just thinking when we first started doing STEM, and we put students into groups and they were working on their engineering design process, trying to get to that essential challenge. And the times the teacher would send them back to their group and say, now, I noticed that you did this, but here's some things that you might want to consider. And so you watch them take it back to their group, and then the conversation that goes on within that small group of 4 or 5 students. And you'll have 1 or 2 students say, well, she said we were not doing this, so how about we try this? Or how about we do this? So you really have a really adult conversation going on with these students here, trying to work out the problem.
That collaborative conversation, accountable talk in the classroom, where the students are not doing a one and done. We're through, can I read a book now? Nothing against books, Elaine. But we're through. could I read a book, or could we play a game, or could we actually take some of this feedback and make our progress go even further? Here's a final thought for you today. Would you agree? It's not going to be easy. It is very difficult. But if it starts with us, then the students will expect it again and again, year after year, and become those thinkers that we want them to be. So our clear target today was to understand more about the metacognitive processes. Elaine has provided you with an excerpt from one of Linda Darling Hammond's articles that will show you how to tie in our academic feedback into the metacognitive processes so that they are married and that they do work in tandem. Additionally, you have the entire article from Grant Wiggins with the 7 academic steps to academic feedback. Those will be very, very, very handy. If you take these back to your classrooms with your team meetings, share these with your colleagues, perhaps you can be on one accord with something such as academic feedback and metacognition. We were asked to add a slide at the end of our presentation. Inside your folder, you have an evaluation of your conference. And so if you would take the time while we're sitting here to go ahead and complete that evaluation, then you can trade it in for a certificate, is my understanding. Are there any questions that you have for Elaine or for me about academic feedback or metacognition? All right. Well, thank you all for your time this afternoon. We appreciate you.